Now, if you're planning to open a Panama bank account online, well, you're probably well aware of the Hollywood plot to pin Panama as the poster child for offshore banking and tax evasion. But here's the thing, Hollywood got it wrong. In fact, Panama has some of the best run, financially stable banks worth considering in the region. Of course, you need to know which banks to choose. In today's video, we're going to explore how individuals, businesses, and even offshore companies can open a Panama bank account online. We'll also discuss whether banking in Panama is safe and a few important considerations resulting from the global pandemic. But before we get started, make sure you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you get alerted every time we post new non-resident banking opportunities. Now, to help you get started, we have a free non-resident banking starter guide. It's designed to help non-resident and foreigners open bank accounts. So don't forget to download your copy using the link in the description below. Okay, first things first, let's talk about the Panama Papers. And yes, they're still relevant. You see, the Panama Papers put the spotlight on Panama as an offshore jurisdiction, resulting in beefed up compliance and more account opening challenges. So, while the leak may have happened in 2016, it's still a sore spot in Panama and in the local banking sector, not surprisingly. Likewise, it would have been hard to find anyone in Panama that was excited about Netflix star-studded film The Laundromat when it was released last year. In any case, it's hard to write an article about Panama without at least mentioning the Panama Papers. Politicians, movie stars, and elite athletes from around the world were involved. And yes, Panama played a role, albeit a lot smaller than the media would like you to believe. In any case, that's the obligatory mention of the leak out of the way. Now, let's talk about something much more relevant and much more exciting, interest rates. Panama bank account interest rates. Now, there are many reasons why someone might want to bank in Panama, not the least of which is the wide range of banks in the country. Additionally, it's common for Panama foundations and companies to open accounts here, since they'll face challenges in most other countries. But one of the main catalysts for foreigners and foreign companies are the high interest rates offered at Panamanian banks. Unlike the US, Canada, or EU member states, banks in Panama offer attractive fixed deposit rates. But this isn't Argentina or Zimbabwe. When you bank in Panama, your account is denominated in US dollars, just like the local economy. Speaking of which, the economy is based on financial and professional services, tourism, and of course, the Panama Canal, making this tiny Central American country one of the most important transport and logistic hubs in the world. So, the interest rates on offer are not only attractive, but they are being offered by banks in a relatively stable environment backed by sound fundamentals. And if you're looking for a risk-adjusted return on your deposit accounts, Panama could be an interesting option for you to consider. Now, let's take a look at another important consideration, the safety and security of Panama banks. Now, before you open a Panama bank account online, take a close look at the bank. How are the financials? Is it well capitalized? How strong are their correspondent banking relationships? These factors are extremely important, especially if you don't plan on visiting the branch in person and getting a first-hand look at the operations. As always, we strongly suggest understanding each bank's financial stability, business operations, investment behavior, and strength of their correspondent banking relationships before you open accounts. That way, you can sleep easy at night knowing your funds are safe. At the very minimum, we suggest confirming bank solvency, bank liquidity, and ask about the bank's business model. In other words, do they generate the majority of their money from lending to retail customers, or do they generate revenue from fees and services? Now, some COVID considerations. Panama is a small country with limited domestic resources. It doesn't have a central bank, and the primary currency in use is the US dollar. The local currency, the Balboa, is only available in coinage. With this in mind, it's no surprise that there's been limited financial support for small businesses, entrepreneurs, and individuals during the COVID pandemic. In other words, companies and employees had to fend for themselves. And you might be thinking, why does this matter to you? Well, Panama doesn't have a deposit guarantee scheme. Instead, the country's bankruptcy code comes into play, which dictates that customers with deposits under $10,000 will be paid back first. That said, the National Bank of Panama, which is a quasi-central bank without any monetary powers, issued a $4 billion bond in August of 2020, the first bond issuance in its history. It's expected that this will be used to provide aid to any of the financial institutions that suffer as a result of the pandemic. So, which Panama banks are safe? Well, like most places in the world, you should avoid banks that are actively engaged in retail lending, toxic investments, have overexposure to construction and real estate, shaky correspondent banking relationships, or fast and loose compliance policies. Instead, focus on banks that have small or non-existent loan portfolios, generate the majority of their revenue through fees and services, and have strong financials. In other words, their business is sound, they're not at risk of losing their correspondent banking relationships, and regulators aren't going to shut them down. Yes, such banks do exist in Panama. In fact, a select few banks in Panama have significantly stronger financials than banks in the US, Canada, and Europe. To find them, you just need to know which questions to ask and where to look. Of course, having a direct introduction to a good banker doesn't hurt either, like the ones we provide to GlobalBanks Insiders. You might be wondering, can you open a Panama bank account online? Well, surprisingly, just about anyone can open a Panama bank account online. In fact, in recent months, we've helped many GlobalBanks Insiders do just that. The best part, though, is that remote opening is possible for not just individuals, but also local and foreign companies, structures, and even foundations. Here's a list of the client types that can consider this option: Panama offshore companies, Panama foundations, foreign companies, offshore companies, investment vehicles, and many more. Of course, your ability to open a Panama bank account online is not guaranteed. Bank compliance here is intense, and you'll need to pass due diligence. You'll also need to prove to the bank that you're worth dealing with and won't cause compliance headaches for them. And of course, you'll need to make sure that the Panama bank you choose actually offers the services that you require. After all, not all banks in Panama are equipped to handle the banking demands of international clients. And sometimes it's difficult to find reliable English language customer support. Online banking can be archaic, and some banks won't even let you make international transfers online, which means you'll have to physically go into the branch every time you want to make an international transfer. With this in mind, let's take a quick look at some of the challenges you'll face when trying to open a Panama bank account online. Like many countries, you will face a few obstacles and inconveniences when trying to open a Panama bank account online. Banking in Panama post-Panama Papers is known to be bureaucratic, time-consuming, compliance-heavy, and difficult to navigate. Most people give up either out of sheer frustration because either they chose the wrong banks, dealt with the wrong bankers, or didn't have the right information going in. Let's take a look at some of the main challenges now. Paperwork required to open a Panama bank account online. Paperwork requirements can be intense. To open a Panama bank account online, you're going to be asked to provide a lot of documentation. Unfortunately, this isn't something you can avoid by showing up in person. It's just the nature of banking in Panama after the Panama Papers. So, while you can't lessen the paperwork requirements, you can expedite and streamline the process dramatically by working with the right banker and confirming all of the account opening requirements with them beforehand. Certification requirements to open a Panama bank account online. Additionally, if you're planning on opening accounts for a foreign or offshore company, you'll discover that banks in Panama require certified documents for everything. And this can get expensive. Of course, in many cases, you'll be asked to get documents certified by the local notary in the country where your company is registered. Then, you'll have to get those documents couriered to the bank, and on top of that, some banks will have different authentication requirements for different types of paperwork. So, you'll need to stay on top of that as well. So getting everything properly certified or authenticated on your first attempt can save you a few $100s. If you do it incorrectly or your banker gave you incorrect information the first time, which does happen, you'll have to go through the process again and do a second mailing. Bottom line, knowing what the real requirements are and doing things correctly the first time around saves you a lot of time and money, especially when you're trying to open a bank account online in Panama. Responsiveness of Panama bankers when opening accounts. Finally, and most importantly, it can be very difficult to find attentive, competent bankers to help you open accounts. Now, while that might seem counterintuitive, it's similar to what you'll find in other banking hubs around the region. To solve this, you really need to be put in direct contact with a reliable, experienced banker that's going to take your application seriously, respond to emails, and pick up the phone when you call. This means finding a banker that speaks your language, understands your business, sees you as a potentially profitable client for the bank, and is willing to deal with a picky foreigner. Ready to open a Panama bank account online? Well, to start opening accounts today, you can obviously use the information that I've shared in this video. Or you can access one of our account opening services and start taking action today. Each of our premium services are designed to help non-resident individuals, foreigners, and their businesses open international bank accounts. Whether you need personal, private, business, offshore, or even US banking, we have an account opening solution that will work for you. You can get started with GlobalBanks IQ, our international banking intelligence service. It gives you step-by-step instructions and all the tools you need to find and open accounts with top banks around the world. Plus, you'll unlock our international intelligence reports, account opening strategies, international bank database, and much more. We also have a dedicated US account opening service called GlobalBanks USA, which is 100% focused on helping non-residents, foreigners, and even foreign and offshore companies open bank accounts in the US. It involves direct one-on-one support from our team of experts and includes access to our US banking intelligence reports, US account opening strategies, and US bank database. And of course, there's our flagship service, GlobalBanks Insider. With GlobalBanks Insider, you'll get access to everything we offer, including all the benefits in GlobalBanks IQ and GlobalBanks USA, plus our entire library of premium reports, the entire GlobalBanks database, and dedicated one-on-one support from our team of international banking experts to help you find and open the accounts you need. So, no matter where you're looking to bank in the world, you're only a few clicks away from finding and opening international accounts. To get started, just click the link in the description below to learn more about the available options. And before signing off, don't forget to hit subscribe so you get alerted every time we share new banking opportunities. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.